I'm Kathy Saltzman Romey, Artistic Director of the Minnesota Chorale, and tonight we're going to be hosting two wonderfully talented conductors, Vinay Thomas, a master's student in conducting at the University of Minnesota, and Matthew Abernathy, a doctoral student in choral conducting at the University of Minnesota. Both have prepared very special sessions which they're going to share with you, and which also involved your participation and interaction. Our emerging conductor program has been going on for at least 10 years and is a partnership with the greater community and especially the University of Minnesota, bringing graduate students and emerging conductors to rehearsals of the chorale and involving them in our scholarship and our performance activity. So without further ado, I want to welcome our first speaker, Vinay Thomas, and you can all unmute and clap and welcome him. Welcome, Vinay.
Thank you, everyone. It's good evening to everyone, and it's great to be here. It's great to connect with many of you. I think that's one of the benefits of Zoom and one of the benefits of being virtual. I'm currently at my friend's house in Dallas. Even though I'm a student in Minnesota, the online classes pushed me to go south and enjoy the warm weather for now. But today I have a very exciting presentation for you, a topic that really interests me and really changed how I engaged with music in my life. So let me share my screen. And so my goal today is to introduce to you the concept of musicking and connect that to my own research of the Indian Orthodox Church and the musicking of that Christian tradition. And so to begin, I would like all of you, as you are able, to just stand or get away from your screen. Go ahead and stand up, or don't worry about looking at the screen. There's nothing to see. I'm going to play an audio clip that lasts about 1 minute, and you are welcome to react however you'd like. You can sing, dance, or you can even do nothing, but the point is you listen and respond. So no matter what you did, if you heard the clip, you once again partook in the process that is known as musicking. I've not yet defined this term, but I pose my initial question to you, now knowing that you have engaged in this process. I invite you to put your answers in the chat or to unmute and answer this question. What is musicking? Or in other words, what does it mean to music? Take about a minute and put your answers in the chat or unmute. To engage with music with the body and mind, sharing a musical experience, be part of the process of music making. I love it. Everyone's welcome to answer, so there's no wrong answers here, but I would like as many people as possible to give their guess at least to what musicking is. Ah, any activity involved. I feel like some people already know about this concept, and that's great. A lot of wonderful answers here. So, a lot of us are already kind of on hitting the nail on the head, if you will. And so this concept, of course, is not mine. It actually comes from the New Zealand musicologist, the late musicologist Christopher Small. Christopher Small has written a number of influential works, but this is perhaps the crowning achievement of his career. He wrote this book in the same year that I was born, in 1998, so this concept is as old as I am. I'll let you do the math on how many years that is. But he goes in his book and he defines it quite early on, and he says, to music is to take part in any capacity in a musical performance, whether by performing, by listening, by rehearsing or practicing, by providing material for performance, what is called composing, or by dancing. So this is a revolutionary concept. It takes us far beyond just the performers. And Christopher Small instead says that there are many more sides to the equation that is a performance. He says there's no such thing as music, there is only musicking. And so when we think about a performance, of course we have our performers, but this expands our notion from the performer to the audience, to the backstage crews and the like. And if there are instruments or sheet music, that is also part of the process. So these are just a few things I put on the slide, but there are many more. In fact, Christopher Small even says that if you are a janitor or an architect, if you help maintain or design the space, you are also part of the process that is musicking. And musicking is all about relationships. So this is the common theme that you'll see throughout the entire presentation this evening. The act of musicking establishes in the place where it is happening a set of relationships, and it is in those relationships that the meaning of the act lies. So, what does this mean? Christopher Small lays out a framework of questions, a progression of questions we can think of. So when we think of a performance, we may typically ask ourselves, what is the meaning of this music? You know, we're very focused on a very small portion of the process. We don't see the forest for the trees. And instead he says, that is actually the wrong question. This is the way we should think about a performance. What does it mean when this performance of this work takes place at this time, in this place, with these participants? So context matters. It's not just the sounds. It's about where the sounds are and why they're there and how they're being played and who all is involved. In other words, what's really going on here? And so there's different schools of thought with this ideology. So there's a school of thought out there that is opposite of what Christopher Small says, known as absolute music. In other words, the music can be abstract. It doesn't matter what the context is. The meaning is always going to be the same. This piece is always going to be sad. This piece is always going to be happy. And Christopher Small says, no, the relationships between the time, place, and participants matter, among many other things. And so he gives us 3 sets of first-order relationships. You can think of this as kind of 3 pillars of the foundation of the process. Among the sounds that are being made, among the people taking part, and among the people and the space that they occupy. So in short, sounds, people, and space. And another way to think about this is you can ask yourself questions. How does this relate? Why are the sounds like this? Why is it being played in that manner? Why are the people arranged like this? Why is the space designed like this? This all matters to the process of musicking. And so these are 3 first order relationships. There's second order and third order. So second order is relationships between relationships, and third order is relationships between relationships between relationships. So if you're starting to pick up, it can become very tricky to talk about these things. Instead, what Christopher Small says is that musicking is about gesture, the language of gesture. And I don't just mean physical gesture. I mean even metaphysically, you know, the way we communicate with nonverbal. When we try to communicate with just text or words, Christopher Small says we can only say one thing at a time, like we can only read one line at a time. But when we are in a concert or in a musicking setting, we're engaging in a web of relationships, first order, second order, third order, all at the same time. It's all happening together. And so to illustrate this, I want to take just, let's think of maybe a hypothetical classical symphonic concert. So this is what Christopher Small focuses his book on, but there's the themes about it can apply to any setting, as I will show you later in my research. But think of just a typical classical symphonic concert. The concert hall, in many cases, is designed for the orchestra or for that setting. You know, there's a distinction between the performers who are there on the stage and the audience. You typically pay for admission. You most likely are formally dressed, and when you get there, you are sitting next to strangers. And it could be that there's levels, so you may sit on one level or the ground level. The seats, certain seats cost more than others. The performers have a certain dress that is matching, and there might be a conductor. And there's this certain etiquette. So when you are in a concert, in a classical concert, you're not supposed to clap during the piece. You're only supposed to clap afterwards. You're supposed to be very quiet, silence your cell phones. Again, the list goes on, but the point is that all of these practices contribute to the relationships that matter with the meaning of a performance. And you have to ask yourself why, because it's different every time. And so if you're familiar with this setting, watch this video, and this video should make you feel a little uncomfortable.
Don't answer. Take a drink.
So we see a few things here. So it's a very short clip, but we obviously see the cell phone has intruded this kind of space of the concert. In fact, the conductor literally stops the concert and he says, "Don't answer, let it ring," in kind of a sarcastic way because he's very upset. The other musicians are upset, and we can see this matters to the experience. So in fact, the title of the video, even though it may be kind of a joke, it's very telling. So the title said, "Haydn killed by cell phone." And why is that? It's because when we have these relationships, we carry expectations on how things should go, and all of that is part of the meaning on what we want to engage in. And speaking of expectations, these relationships, of course, lead to those. The relationships articulated by a musical performance are not so much those that actually exist as they are the relationships that those taking part desire to exist. So in some sense, the settings we engage in any performative setting, in any musicking setting, don't reflect necessarily the reality outside the musicking hall, but it still matters in what we are saying is our potential ideals that we value. To illustrate this, I decided to focus on the specific example of the Concertgebouw concert hall. So I've done a little research on this hall. This hall was built in the late 19th century. It's in Amsterdam. It's a very famous concert hall, world-class orchestra, world-class conductors, very high-class European-esque, European-style classical concerts. But my point is that this was not always the case in Amsterdam. So when the hall was built, there was this big debate on which way they wanted the culture of Amsterdam to move. So before this concert hall was built, a lot of the concerts were considered to be second-class musical scenes. So there were more social settings. The orchestra wasn't the center of attention. It wasn't so formal. But then with the construction of this building, it completely changed how the concerts were performed and the nature of the etiquette and all of that. In fact, Daryl Cressman, as you see here on the bottom left, he wrote a book about how this building corresponded with much of the cultural change. And so I've talked about the sound of the people in the space. So this is, again, all three of those, but really highlighting the space. And so to further illustrate this, I want to invite my professor, Professor Kathy Romey. She has had the great privilege and benefit of being in the Concertgebouw Concert Hall. So Professor Romey, I'd love for you to tell about your recent experiences in that concert hall.
Thank you, Vinay. Great to participate in your session. I had spoken to Vinay about this particular space because I'd visited it a number of years ago when my son was studying in Amsterdam. And what struck me about the Concertgebouw and the experience there was what Vinay alluded to, is that it is a space for social interaction, and it is a space where people came both formally and informally dressed, where they gathered before the concert and they were able to have a free beverage of their choice. This is provided in the price of the ticket. Likewise, in intermission, they are able to participate and engage with one another over a free beverage of their choice. And all of this transferred into the concert hall experience itself, where people were much freer in terms of their interactions with one another and also in their engagement with the music. And afterwards, the performers were out in the lobby greeting and were also engaging in the experience that moved from the concert stage into the concert hall and back out into the lobby. It was a wonderful experience, and I love the fact that it was a very intergenerational experience.
Absolutely. So thank you for that, Professor Romey. And so, yeah, her experiences, I mean, any of our experiences, whether we realize it or not, affirm this process of musicking. All the elements matter. Those taking part in a musical performance are in effect saying to themselves, to one another, and to anyone else who may be watching or listening, this is who we are. And so to continue this conversation, I want to switch topics a little bit and shift the conversation to my own research of the Indian Orthodox Church, otherwise known as the Malankara Orthodox Church. This is the church I was born and baptized in. It's the reason my last name is Thomas. If you meet an Indian who has a biblical name, first or last, and there's a few in this call, such as Jacob, Samuel, Matthew, Simon. If they have a biblical name, they're very likely Christian, and so my last name is Thomas. So that's just something a lot of people don't know. And so a little background about Christianity in India. Saint Thomas the Apostle, it's believed that in the year AD 52, he went to Kerala. He went to Kerala and converted a few communities into Christianity there, and thus began the almost 2,000-year tradition of Christianity. Of course, there's infinite amount of changes throughout the generations. There's some history of colonization in the 15th and 16th century with the Portuguese and the Dutch. All of this matters in the influence, and of course, I'm a practicing Indian Orthodox Christian in the United States, so this is spread internationally to a degree. There's Indian Orthodox Christians, there's Indian Catholic Christians, Indian Protestant Christians, and a few other denominations. So it's a widespread community that has about 24 million plus members just in India alone. These are pictures from my church in Farmers Branch, Texas. It's a suburb of Dallas. So it's a relatively large congregation, although this building is just about 10 years old. The congregation has existed for many decades before that. And let me just, returning to the ideas of musicking, right? We have sound, people, and space in the first order relationships. Just look at this picture on the right of a typical Sunday service, what we call kurbana. You see a lot of very common things of the Indian Orthodox Church. You know, of course, every church is different, but I'm going to focus on just my church. Number one, there's a high level of congregational participation. There's a lot of people. This is very normal. Number two, there's men and women on separate sides. It's part Indian culture, part Christian, part Indian tradition, part Christian tradition, all mixed in one. It's all combined. There's a distinction between the priests and the altar boys and the congregation, and typically the younger people sit towards the front and the older people sit towards the back, although there's plenty of exceptions to that. But there's already this structure. You can already kind of tell the structure and how the people are arranged in the space. The bottom left picture you can see there's a lot of people involved. It looks like a baptism because the child is at the front getting ready to be baptized, but just look at how many people are involved. It's a very strong community in certain pockets of the United States, especially. It's a very tight-knit community going along the structure. This is a picture of a vacation Bible school, so you can see all the youth of the church are there, and you see even within this picture, maybe we don't realize it, but there's a structure to this picture as well. So the youngest kids are on the front, the older and taller kids are on the back, and then the priest and the organizers of the event, the hierarchically the most important for this vacation Bible school are in the front and center, and of course the priest is holding a baby. That's symbolic in its own right. But the point is, even as youth, from the moment of baptism or from the moment of birth, really, it's really it takes a village to raise a child type of mentality with how we grow in the Indian Orthodox Church. It's a large community, at least where I grew up in Dallas. And so, of course, these are not arbitrary facts about the church. It's not just a lot of people. It's not just a structure. This all matters to how we music, right? And I'm talking about musicking, that process we just talked about. So I'm going to focus, there's many services, but I'm going to focus specifically on the typical Sunday service, the Kurbana. It's about 2 hours or 2.5 hours long in total. And I want to just introduce to you some elements of this service and some of the ways we engage in musicking in this service. So typically, yes, there is a choir. I mean, but the chorus is not that distinct from the congregation. So there's a unique dynamic there. What I kind of call them loosely is the chorus is just people in the congregation who have the microphones to sound louder. I mean, they're typically singing and chanting the same thing everyone else is. It's not like they sing something and everyone else listens very often. There's the biggest theme I want you to take away from this Indian Orthodox musicking is that it is an immersive, meditative type of musicking. So, in other words, think of an entire service, 2.5 hours of 95% singing or chanting. And that really, really matters. What I learned is that throughout the whole service, even for myself, I don't understand the native language very much. I grew up here in the States and I'm not very fluent. Even when I don't understand what they're saying, it's not about what they're saying, it's about how they're saying it or singing it and musicking it. So when you are surrounded by chanting and singing for so long, it helps you reach this spiritual connection and it helps you engage very much. So there's much more elements to this, but to illustrate this, I want you to listen to this short video. This is from my own research last winter. This is from my own church at a point in service on Sunday. So you hear that everyone's chanting, men and women, and it's just a high level of participation. It's an oral tradition, and it's typically everything's sung in the same pitch, so everyone matches each other. There's really no harmonies or sense of variation in harmony like that. So everyone's chanting and singing the same things. This is a picture of the service book that we have. So because it is an oral tradition, much of what you learn and sing is, of course, by ear. You learn by listening to the elders. When you grow up, you just learn these things, listening and singing yourself. But an important thing to note is there's a lot of variation in how the people can sing. And some people sing better than others. We know that as a fact of life. But all these elements, when I talk about how it's sung, it matters. That really plays a role here. But the unique thing about the Indian Orthodox Church recently, within the past few years, is that this book in particular, this book is now common to all Indian Orthodox churches in the world. So before 2017, different churches had different variations of this book. So the prayers were the same, but the words were a little bit different, different translation here and there. And so even when I look at this hymn, By the Prayers of Your Mother, I remember it as By Thy Mother's Earnest Prayer. So there's already variations here that matter in how I engage in the service. And so also with this book, logistically speaking, it's very useful for, this is the reason why it is so accepted now. It has on every 2 pages, it has annotations, the Malayalam script, which is the language of Kerala, and the Manglish, which is transliterated Malayalam. Manglish is Malayalam plus English in one word, and of course the English translation. And specifically for me, really only being fluent in English, I really pay attention to the English, and I noticed that the variations of words don't necessarily matter as much as how we sing the words. And so this is just something to note as part of this process of musicking. So what I want to do now is I want us to listen to 2 different clips. I'm going to play each clip 2 times. I'm going to play the first clip and then the second clip and then the first clip and the second clip. And I want you to listen and put your thoughts on anything you hear or see and observe in the chat. So I'm going to play both of them. Both of them feature a priest chanting a prayer, finishing the prayer, and the congregation saying Amen after that. So let's take a listen.
വസിച്ച് ഈ കാസായിലെ കലർപ്പിനെ ഞങ്ങളുടെ ദൈവമായ മെശിഹാ തമ്പുരാന്റെ രക്തമായി ആക്കി തീർക്കുമാറാകട്ടെ.
നിനക്കും ഏകജാതനും പരിശുദ്ധാത്മാവിനും സ്തുതിയും നിനക്കും ഏകജാതനും പരിശുദ്ധാത്മാവിനും സ്തുതിയും സ്തോത്രവും സമർപ്പിക്കുന്നു. ഹോശോ പബുകുലസ്ബാൻ ലവൽ മീ.
And I'll play them once more, but go ahead and put your thoughts in the chat.
വസിച്ച് ഈ കാസായിലെ കലർപ്പിനെ ഞങ്ങളുടെ ദൈവമായ മെശിഹാ തമ്പുരാന്റെ രക്തമായി ആക്കി തീർക്കുമാറാകട്ടെ.
നിനക്കും ഏകജാതനും പരിശുദ്ധാത്മാവിനും സ്തുതിയും സ്തോത്രവും സമർപ്പിക്കുന്നു. ഹോശോ പബുകുലസ്ബാൻ ലവൽ മീ.
I'm just going to stop sharing for a second. Does anyone have any thoughts about that they want to unmute and speak about, or if not, please put your thoughts in the chat on what you noticed in those videos. So I see minor versus major tonalities. One priest may use more ornamentation, light instrumental worship. Yeah, these are great. These are some of the things I was going to touch on. So quite obviously they're different, and I should point out that both of these are at different points in the service. So it's not completely, all the variables are not completely adjusted for, but the point remains that one priest chants this way and the other priest chants this way, and the congregation responds to the priest and how the priest chants, and this matters. So while these 2 priests sound very nice, they sing very nicely, not all priests sound so pleasant to the ear, and often what you'll hear is people may complain, oh, I don't like the way this priest sung, or I don't like the way this priest led service. And it's funny because there's all the priests say the same prayers, but people also really care about how it's done, how it's sung. Of course, there's also different variations in the choir and the congregation and the pianist. I personally have played piano for my own church a little bit, and I know how those dynamics work. And so there's just a whole web of relationships here that really matter. You may have also noticed just how decorated the services are. These are both larger churches, and the priest is wearing very beautiful garments. Again, like I've been saying, like a broken record by now, everything is contributing to the nature of the service, regardless of. It's almost like what is being said is not even important. This priest could be making up a new language, but it's like the way he's singing. You get this sense of, oh my gosh, it's very spiritual and very reverent. So I would like us to chant a little bit of a psalm. It's more common for lay people to chant in the psalm. It's one of the few places that females can chant, and it's typically done one person and one person. And so maybe at the beginning of the service, they'll go and say to someone in the congregation, hey, when this part comes up, can you chant this psalm? So you can stay muted, but what I would like you to do is repeat after me as I lead the chant of this psalm. It's very simple, but just it's an oral tradition, so you learn by listening and repeating. My God, you are my God, earnestly I seek you. Sing that with me. My God, you are my God, earnestly I seek you. And then the next line. My soul thirsts for you, my flesh faints for you. Say that with me. My soul thirsts for you, my flesh faints for you. And then the next line. Like the thirsty earth where there is no water. Say that with me. Like the thirsty earth where there is no water. So I'm choosing to do it more like a sing-songy approach, but what you may hear is, my God, you are my God, earnestly I seek you. It may be closer to the spoken side, but it's still a little bit different than just flat out speaking it, but it has more of a chant flowy feel. Let's do just a little bit more. So I'll do both lines, and then you repeat after me. All who swear by him shall exult, for the mouth of liars will be stopped. Say it with me. All who swear by him shall exult, for the mouth of liars will be stopped. And then, so the psalm is one person and one person going back and forth, but then at the very end, everyone says, and to you belongs praise, O God, barik you more. So say that with me. And to you belongs praise, O God, barik you more. Barik you more is a Syriac word that means bless me, O Lord. So much of the liturgy has Syriac roots from the West Syriac tradition. I haven't touched on that very much, but there's a lot of it's not just fully Indian music, whatever that is. There's a Syriac and outside influence tradition as well in the language and the style of tonality that I've sung in and that you've heard in the clips. And so this is to wrap up this portion of the presentation. I just want to show you a picture from last Sunday when I went to church. Quite obviously, you can see it's a socially distanced service. And even from this picture, and even from that one Sunday when I came back to my own church in Dallas, it was my first time back in quite a while, I could tell many different things thinking about these things of musicking, right? So you can see, there's still, even though most people are not there for safety protocol, there's still an important part of them that wants to show up and dress up appropriately. There's this idea we want to still keep to this tradition. You can see right here in the center, they are streaming the service. And right here is the priest. This is a guest priest. And the main priest is actually behind the veil preparing for the service. So this is the early morning prayer part of the service. You see the altar boys, and many of them have mics. What I found with the microphones in particular is very, very interesting, because what I find is a lot of spaces don't need microphones for audibility. So you don't need these mics to hear. In fact, what I discovered is often it's very important that they use the mic not just for hearings, that's sometimes the case, but it's more for actually, I think, creating just a greater collective sound that, I don't know, it might be used in some sense for some spirituality and such. I came to that conclusion because even in small churches, you notice they really want to use a mic and make it very loud and resonant. So it's all part of this immersive character of the music that really really matters, as is everything matters. To wrap up this presentation, I just want to touch a little bit on COVID musicking. That is musicking right now during the pandemic. Obviously, how we engage in performances and engage in the process of musicking is completely different. That's the obvious part, but how is that difference affecting us? That's really the interesting part of this conversation. And so I want you to listen to both of these video clips. One is they're both of the end of the Hallelujah chorus. One is a virtual performance, one is a recording of a live performance. And if you would like, put your thoughts in the chat. So even within these videos, obviously there's many different types of virtual performance. There's many different types of live performance. You could have a small group, a large group. You could have the sound editing could be a little different. The one on the right, the live performance had an orchestra, but often there's no orchestra when the choir does it. So the variables aside, one is still virtual, and one is still live. And think about it. Even though we are experiencing both on our computer screens, that is the common variable here. We still get a different reaction from one over the other, right? But that reaction in our engagement of it is part of the process of musicking. So there's a lot more here to think about, but just food for thought on this whole idea of virtual choir. What I found is a lot of people, when the pandemic began, there was this whole push for people to put out virtual choir videos. Everyone's like, oh look, I did it. Oh look, my group did it. Oh look at our virtual choir. Everyone was putting these out, and I found that it honestly wasn't even about what the video had in it, what the piece was. I found that there was a social component to it. So groups wanted to say, look, we did this too. There was some level of social validation there. And so that's very telling, right? Like all these performances it's not just about performing music. It's not even about listening. It's about, it has, social and political, economic, any type of facet you can think of. These all have great implications to how we think about this. So, of course, the book is available for purchase if you'd like to read through this concept. It seems like many of us already understood this even before my presentation. But regardless, this is a book that changed my life, and I hope it at least, changes your life and opens your perspective on what it means to engage in a process of musicking. And so the final thing I'll say is we are all capable of musicking. So what Christopher Small and what I believe is nobody's too bad to sing. We often hear, I can't sing, I'm not good enough, or oh, this or that. But he believes that we are all able to engage and perform in a non-formal way, and we are born with that capability. So just keep in mind, this is all very important, whether we realize it or not, and it's all in part of the main experience. And so with that, I want to conclude my presentation, and I open it up to any questions or thoughts people may have. Thank you.
Well, Vinay, I want to first of all thank you, and hopefully there will be one or two questions, but Vinay is working on his thesis currently, and it uses a lot of this research. It does occur to me, what will musicking look like post-COVID? How will we experience the space, the connection, the music, the lobby? How will that feel? And what will be the overall kind of experience for people who finally are able to come back together and make music?
I know we're short on time here. We have just a few minutes, but I've put my email in the chat. So if you'd like to follow up or have any questions there, you can just email me in my personal email, and we can. I'm happy to discuss and share any thoughts people have, if it doesn't happen right now.
I'll introduce myself. My name is Cynthia Jones, and Vinay was choir director at my church before COVID struck. And one of the things that I want to mention is that I had been a member of that choir in my church for 38 years. And when Vinay came to direct us, I really experienced musicking, I think, for the first time, because he provided for such an intimate, all-encompassing experience. We didn't often stay in the chancel. We often stood out in front of the altar. Vinay sang with us. He chose not necessarily to direct us, and we have never sung better. And I think that it was that whole totality of the concept that you showed us, that I found a remarkable experience. I'm very pleased to have had it.
Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, I really, that was my first time having any sort of job like that, and in addition to being my first year in Minnesota and first year of graduate school, so that was a huge learning experience for me too.
My name is Paul. I'm Cynthia's husband and also a member of that same church that we were so lucky to have the name for. When Kathy spoke, Miss Romney, about imagining the experience of coming back together, it nearly moved me to tears. Just thinking about the joy that we will experience then.
I completely agree. And we have many Minnesota Chorale singers in the room. We also have many family and friends of Vinay and also of Matt. And it's just so special to be able to think about these things where we are right now, where we will be perhaps in 6 months or 1 year. But I completely agree. The joy that we will experience in being able to come together again as a community around worship, around song, is going to be something that I think may be unique in many of our lifetimes. Any final questions for Vinay? I see one. If the architect of the music hall is musicking, is my bassoon's maker also musicking? So is the maker of the bassoon also musicking? And Vinay, Bob
Yes.
says yes, and Vinay says yes. Well, thank you again, Vinay. This has been such a stimulating topic to consider. And I will say that Vinay and Matt have already given these presentations one time in our seminar, and all of his colleagues took up this idea of musicking. So it may become a leitmotif throughout the other presentations. We're going to move now to Matthew Abernathy, who is our doctoral student. And let's unmute for a moment and give Vinay a big hand. And now we'll mute. So we're going to welcome Matthew Abernathy to our virtual space, and he has a topic that I think will equally engage you. Welcome, Matt Abernathy, our second-year doctoral student in choral conducting.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to be going after Vinay because I think starting out by talking about musicking is a really interesting connection into my topic, which is talking about opera and opera chorus. And I think when you think about opera, it's in a lot of ways exactly what musicking is alluding to. It's sort of the combination of all these different elements that make a performance particularly unique: costumes and staging and sets and music, and all of it together is what makes for the ultimate performance. So I'm going to share my screen and launch right in. So I used to work at Minnesota Opera, and I was the director of their youth program called Project Opera for several years. And I have just become really passionate about opera chorus, and it's sort of my area of love. So we're going to start out today by listening to 3 performances of the Pilgrim's chorus from Tannhäuser, which you'll probably recognize. I'm going to play all 3 of them. As I'm playing them, just listen to them and think about what you hear, what you notice, differences, similarities. I'll give you the one difference out front. Mormon Tabernacle sings in English, the rest sing in German. So that one you can't say. But after we've played those 3, I'll have you just enter some thoughts into the chat, anything that you notice at all. So here we go. Clip number 1. So we're shifting from a volunteer chorus to the Bavarian Radio Chorus and Orchestra. The Bavarian Radio Chorus is a German symphony chorus. They're all professional singers. They're all paid. Many of them are full-time, though not all. So it's really one of the premier choral ensembles in Germany. And then last but not least, this is a clip from the Bayreuth Festival. I think this is a performance from the early 70s. So just know the sound quality is not the most brilliant, but I think it'll still give you the idea of what we're hearing. So if you'll take a second, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if you just want to put any thoughts into the chat, things that you heard, things that you noticed, differences, similarities, anything that strikes you at all. Yeah, so Rick says the first one is youthful, light, and bright. Mormon Tabernacle, so few dynamics, lacked feeling. Second was more dramatic and emotion. Third had physical drama, so more emotional. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the third one begins very differently. Music on drama. MTC was pale and pallid. I won't share this with anyone in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. They're getting lambasted right now. Yeah, trying to sing beautifully. Yeah, I mean, all three of these ensembles are really different, and you can hear, in the spirit of musicking, you can hear the same words, the same piece, the same note, same composer, three different ensembles with three completely different understandings of how the music works, which I just think is amazing. So one of the reasons I bring this up is because what really interests me is sort of the opera chorus has this reputation of being a little scary, that it's something that we mortals don't approach. But I hope to show you that the opera chorus and the symphony chorus, in a lot of ways, aren't that different. So here are some of the big differences and some of the big similarities between them. So the major one for me is that most of the time symphony choruses and chamber choirs perform with music in hand. Opera choruses are always memorized. There is, of course, the issue of opera choruses move all over the place. If you've ever been in a musical or done any kind of theater or opera, you know that sometimes finding the conductor through all these other bodies as you're moving around stage is really challenging. So we have some sort of syncing issues there. Opera choruses never sing in sections. You are mixed up with all sorts of people. You could have the tenor soloist in one ear, and you could have a bass over here and a tenor in front of you, and it really demands a high level of competence with your part and real comfort with what you're singing. Chorus sizes, a really big surprise too. When we do a Verdi Requiem with Minnesota Chorale, we're somewhere between 120 and 150 singers. If you do a Verdi Traviata, you're probably closer to 50, so you're about 12 or 13 people per part. So you can imagine how comfortable you need to be singing. As I say, there's no safety in numbers in opera. You have to just know your stuff. One of the big contrasts I think that we notice is the aural one. Of course, when you compare the Bayreuth performance to the Mormon Tabernacle performance, and even to the Bavarian radio chorus, you can hear that Bayreuth is a very big sound. I like to call this, it's a unified but not homogenized sound. So Mormon Tabernacle is homogenized. The goal is that every single tenor two sounds like one voice. In the opera chorus, the goal is that we're doing the same thing at the same time, with the same vowel, on the same pitch, in the same rhythm, but that we're still embracing the unique voice, and that my job as chorus master is to try to take all of these disparate ideas and agree upon how we're going to do it this time. Language proficiency is another real difference, I think, in the opera chorus, because so for example, I was supposed to prepare the chorus for Flying Dutchman last summer. And that piece is about 2 hours, I think it's about 2 hours and 20 minutes long, of which about 58 minutes of it are chorus. So almost half of the opera is chorus singing in German in 3 different ensembles. So that just the sheer volume of German text that you have to be competent with is really extreme. So when I do opera chorus auditions, I'm really listening for language so that I can go in and refine these things and not have to start from scratch, because as anybody who's sung a piece in a foreign language knows, the language can be more difficult than just about any other aspect of it, getting the text to really feel comfortable. So I care about that a lot. I also like to talk about achievable details with opera choruses. in the symphony chorus, we get to be really detailed in our work, and we get to go after a perfect crescendo, the exact articulation, that perfect blend and balance, and moving parts around to accommodate that. Because our responsibility is to mostly stand there, be with the conductor, be with the orchestra, and sing and deliver all these details. With the opera chorus, you've got a lot of things going on. So I try to make it as foolproof as possible. I try to make releases and final consonants really obvious. I try to make dynamics really clear and simple, not at the expense of losing the music. But I have a colleague who likes to say, she used to teach at Yale Drama, and her students, she taught production there, and her students used to get on her about, these singers, they don't seem to be able to do anything. It's not really that complicated. And so every year she would give them a task, and their job was, they had to memorize the Shakespeare sonnet, and they had to recite it perfectly and dramatically while making her a martini. You can imagine how quickly that devolved when they realized that, wait, if I'm delivering this line and like trying to stir something at the same time, I get confused and then I forget a word. There's a lot of things going on. So as we prepare opera choruses, the goal is as simple as possible without sacrificing music. Then, of course, there are all the non-musical aspects that we expect of the opera chorus members. So acting, costumes. If you're a soprano or an alto in a period piece in opera, you're probably wearing some enormous ball gown with a corset, and it's tight and it's hard to sing in, and it's uncomfortable. There are just all these other factors that make the opera chorus, on the one hand, very complicated, and yet all of these things make it so exciting because it helps you inhabit the character of the music so intensely. As I think the Bayreuth was a perfect example of that, of how different that intensity can feel. So when we talk about opera choristers and sort of the things that you would notice about someone who sings in an opera chorus, the first one I always notice is the solo voice. We're always assuming that you're singing with your complete solo instrument. And again, my job as chorus master is to take those things and sort of make them all work together. As I mentioned, acting abilities are super important because ultimately opera is a dramatic art form. So the drama and the narrative and the arc of the piece is equally as important as the music, and we want to have both of those at once. One of the weird quirks about opera is that we really expect you to learn your music independently, usually. There are a couple examples of places where they have agreements within the union because they're union choruses. They're not allowed to learn it musically because they're paid hourly. That's a whole nother discussion for another day, but we can talk about that some other time. But independent music learning is really expected because, like for Flying Dutchman last summer, I had 4 rehearsals to learn all of the music. So we couldn't come in sight reading. Language proficiency, again, is super important. And of course, the odd outlier for opera is musicianship and sight reading. If you've ever auditioned for a chamber choir or a symphony chorus, you have definitely done some sight reading. There's going to be some kind of example there. In the opera chorus, nobody ever does sight reading examples, partially because we expect you to learn music outside of rehearsal, and we don't really care how that happens. But there's a part of me that wants to kind of start doing that, just to sort of add that little extra twist to it. So I thought I would talk for a moment about rehearsal techniques, because I think there might be some of you who work with choruses, there may be some of you who sing in choruses, and they're just things to think about. The first one, sorry, I'm just going to shift around my screen here. The first thing that I kind of live my opera life by is that there is limited rehearsal time, so we have to use every second of it. 4 rehearsals, it gives me about 2 hours and 15 minutes of actual singing time. So I've got to use every second. The first bullet point has profoundly changed my understanding of conducting. You need to be able to give specific vocal advice in rehearsal. This is something Donald Palumbo, who's the chorus master at the Metropolitan Opera, said. And a couple of years ago, I went back and started studying voice again with a really great pedagogue. And it has totally changed how I understand singing and how I approach my rehearsals, because I think about it from the perspective of a singer. Which leads me to, I talk about things like unifying vowels by sound and technique. So rather than showing you how I want it, like it should look like this, I try to go to a root technical cause of why the vowel sounds wrong to me or doesn't quite work. A great example of this is if you, after we're done today, if you go on YouTube and you watch a video of Pavarotti sort of in his 30s, and you watch him sing something with a high A in it, his mouth is probably open about this much, really small. By contrast, if you go watch a video of Jonas Kaufmann singing the same aria at the same pitch, his mouth is open about this much and his lips are trumpeted out like this to make the sound. And yet, if you close your eyes, you know the vowel, you know the pitch, you know it's all ostensibly the same. So I have taken that approach in my teaching and in my work, that I try to unify by the technique that makes the singing best, rather than trying to make it look like something else, because nobody's going to be the same exactly. Of course, opera choruses have vibrato. My ear is very accustomed to vibrato. It's just sort of part of my mentality. So vibrato should be there in the opera chorus. It's expected. There are certain choruses where you would ask for less, but not many. That said, I really go after vibrato that's natural. That's actually a result of good balanced singing. So it's not artificial. And vibrato to me is its most obvious when we're over singing. I love this quote from Margaret Hillis, who was the chorus director at the Chicago Symphony. And she used to say, never sing louder than beautiful. So I say that almost every time I prepare an opera chorus, because it's easy to try to out-sing one another. Symphony choruses too, for that matter. I also work at tempo right away. I feel like part of my goal is to get you physically connected to the singing immediately. So we start and we go fast and we work with all components. I do some text in rhythm, some neutral syllable thing, depending on the score. If there's a lot of words that I need to do and they're really fast, I might take the text out of context, but I try to work pretty much with everything right away. We almost never do sectionals because you need to come in learned. And then I repeat and run things frequently. I'm trying to get you memorized, because remember, by the end of my 4 rehearsals, you need to be memorized so that we can get on stage and start acting this thing out. So I repeat and I run and I give quick feedback, and we just do it again and again and again. And last but not least, this applies to every aspect of my musical life. Fix diction, style, tone, affect, you name it, fix it right away, because as soon as you get a bad habit ingrained, it's so hard to get rid of it. If you've ever taught children and you teach them a wrong note once, getting that fixed is almost impossible. So I get pretty specific right away, in the hopes that by the time we finish the process, you have ingrained these things so well that it just feels totally comfortable once I throw you on stage and you're doing crazy movements at the same time. So we're going to jump and we're going to play a little bit tonight, and we're going to be our own virtual opera chorus. I think my bad pun is that this is the Metropolitan Opera tonight. So you're welcome for that terrible joke. And we're going to look at the Habanera from Carmen. This is a tune I'm hopeful that many of you will just kind of recognize. So I'll just play a little clip just to get it into your ear.
Me
pause there for a moment. So the good thing about that particular chorus is that that's basically all of the musical material that you've heard. So the whole chorus is built on those things. I'm going to put a couple of things into the chat right now. So there are two things that I've put in there. The first one says Carmen lyrics, and the second one says habanera score. So depending on how you feel tonight, you can either open one or both. The lyrics are just the words printed in French on the left and in English on the right. The stuff in bold is what the chorus is singing, so that's what you'll be focusing on. You're also welcome to open up the habanera score, which is just copied right out of the vocal score, and you can follow along in that. For tonight, we're just going to be learning the melody for this and just sort of playing around with some language. Our goal is not complete perfection, but just a little bit of fun on a Thursday night. So I'm going to reshare again. All right, so we're going to work through some text first because the text is really the challenging thing here. It's French. French, I always joke with French that what you see is not what you get. So the words, sometimes the combinations of letters don't always make sense to how they ultimately sound. There are lots of rules in French, but I'm not going to teach all of them tonight. All right, here we go. So I'll say it first, then I'll have you repeat it after me. So the first set goes, l'amour est un oiseau rebelle que nul ne peut apprivoiser. Ready? 1 and 2. L'amour est un oiseau rebelle que nul ne peut apprivoiser. Second half of that verse goes, et c'est bien en vain qu'on l'appelle si lui convient de refuser. Say that much. Ready? And go. Et c'est bien en vain qu'on l'appelle si lui convient de refuser. And then the last little sentence goes, prends garde à toi. 1 and go. Prends garde à toi, which in parlance means watch yourself. All right, I'm going to say the whole first verse again. I'll say the whole thing, then we'll go back and we'll say the whole thing. So the first verse goes, l'amour est un oiseau rebelle que nul ne peut apprivoiser, et c'est bien en vain qu'on l'appelle si lui convient de refuser. Let's say all that together. 1 and go. L'amour est un oiseau rebelle que nul ne peut apprivoiser, et c'est bien en vain qu'on l'appelle si lui convient de refuser. All right, we're going to move on to verse 2. So this goes, l'amour est enfant de bohème, il n'a jamais connu de loi. Just that much all together. 1 and go. L'amour est enfant de bohème, il n'a jamais connu de loi. Here's the second half. Si tu ne m'aimes pas, je t'aime. Si je t'aime, prends garde à toi. Here's the second half together, and 1. Si tu ne m'aimes pas, je t'aime. Si je t'aime, prends garde à toi. And then we have the same button at the end, prends garde à toi. Say it together, and 1. Prends garde à toi. All right, here's the whole second verse. I'll say it once, and then you repeat it back. You're welcome to say these with me as well, but I'll do it twice. 1 and go. L'amour est enfant de bohème. Il n'a jamais connu de loi. Si tu ne m'aimes pas, je t'aime. Si je t'aime, prends garde à toi. All right. Let's move on to verse 3. Flying through some French. I'll come back and take some questions on this, so don't fret. Okay, verse 3 has the same rhythmic pattern as verse 1, just in case you're following along with that. So this goes tout autour de toi, vite, vite, il vient, s'en va, puis il revient. Let's say those two lines. And 1. Tout autour de toi, vite, vite, il vient, s'en va, puis il revient. Good, here's the second half. Tu crois le tenir, il t'évite. Tu crois l'éviter, il te tient. Second half all together, and 1. Tu crois le tenir, il t'évite. Tu crois l'éviter, il te tient. And then the last paragraph there is exactly the same as verse 2. We've done it all. All right, we're going to go back to verse 1. So I'll sing part of it, and then you can sing it back. Let me turn up the piano. All right, so the first part goes... L'amour est un oiseau rebelle que nul ne peut apprivoiser. Let's sing just that much. And 1. L'amour est un oiseau rebelle que nul ne peut apprivoiser. Here's the second half of the phrase. And 1. Et c'est bien en vain qu'on l'appelle, s'il lui convient de refuser. Second half all together, and 1. Et c'est bien en vain qu'on l'appelle, s'il lui convient de refuser. And as I said, I'm only focusing on the melody for this, so if you want to sing in parts, you're totally welcome to, but I'm just going to focus on the melody for tonight. All right, and then the last button for this goes... Regarde à toi. All together, and 1. Regarde à toi. And that's all there is to it. All right, verse 2. Here's verse 2. So this goes, and 1. L'amour est enfant de bohème, il n'a jamais, jamais connu de loi. Let's do just that much, okay? L'amour, and 1. L'amour est enfant de bohème, il n'a jamais, jamais connu de loi. Here's the second half of that. Si tu ne m'aimes pas, je t'aime. Si je t'aime, prends garde à toi. Second half, and 1. Si tu ne m'aimes pas, je t'aime. Si je t'aime, prends garde à toi. And then the same button at the end. Prends garde à toi. And 1. Prends garde à toi. All right. Turning on to our final verse of this. Final verse. Same melody as verse 1. So this is, and 1. I'm sorry, I started in the wrong spot. My mistake. And 1. Tout autour de toi, vite, vite, il vient, s'en va, puis il revient. Put that together. And 1. Tout autour de toi, vite, vite, il vient, s'en va, puis il revient. Here's the second half, and 1. Tu crois le tenir, il t'évite, tu crois l'éviter, il te tient. And then we've sung the last part. All right, can we put this whole third verse together, starting at tout autour, all together? 2 and 1. Tout autour de toi, vite, vite, il vient, s'en va, puis il revient. Tu crois le tenir, il t'évite, tu crois l'éviter, il te tient. a lot of French we just covered, and a lot of music. Don't fret. This again, this is only for play and for fun. You will not be graded on this process. So let's take a quick sort of dance through this text from the beginning. So we're just going to sing through all the chorus text all together. L'amour. Ready? 2 and 1. L'amour est un oiseau rebelle que nul ne peut apprivoiser. Et c'est bien en vain qu'on l'appelle s'il lui convient de refuser. Then we have our button, prends garde à toi, and go. Prends garde à toi. Then there's a second one, slightly different pitch, but almost identical. Prends garde à toi. Now we're on to verse 2. The cool thing about this chorus is also that Carmen sings everything before we sing it. So it's almost all call and response. It's beautiful. All right, here we are at L'amour. Verse 2. 2 and 1. L'amour est enfant de bohème. Il n'a jamais connu de loi. Si tu ne m'aimes pas, je t'aime. Si je t'aime, prends garde à toi. Prends garde à toi. Then we have the same response a couple bars later. And 1. Prends garde à toi. And then we're skipping on. Final verse. Here we go. Tout autour. 2 and 1. Tout autour de toi, vite, vite. Il vient, s'en va, puis il revient. Tu crois le tenir, il t'évite. Tu crois l'éviter, il te tient. We have our same set of tags here. 2 and 1. Prends garde à toi. And then the same on the last one. 2 and 1. Prends garde à toi. And then we have our final sing of L'amour est enfant. 2 and 1. L'amour est enfant de bohème. Il n'a jamais connu de loi. Si tu ne m'aimes pas, je t'aime. Si je t'aime, prends garde à toi. Prends garde à toi. And last but not least, and 1. Prends garde à toi. And then the very last chord, there's a couple little held notes that just go, à toi, which are notoriously hard to put together in real life. Whew. Okay, that was a lot of French. So let's back up here. So a couple of questions we're thinking about. Now, obviously, I'm not super worried about language imperfection tonight, but I want you to think about as you're singing this, these 2 questions here. So we're asking ourselves, this is something your director would probably ask you, who is the chorus portraying? So who is your character? And what's their view on the situation? So when you look at this scene as you're watching and singing along, you'll notice that there are soldiers there. There are some guys just kind of hanging around in street clothes. There are the girls who are just leaving the factory. There are some girls who may not be in the factory. And then there's Carmen. So which one are you? You can pick anybody. And then what's your view on the situation? So if you're a guy, was Carmen, are you trying to date Carmen? If you're a girl, is Carmen someone you like? Do you want to be like her? Is she a role model? Is she someone you hate because she stole your boyfriend? All of these questions, all of these decisions that we make influence your character, influence your singing, and make the opera more compelling because it's all about the characters and the story connected to the music. So take a moment, make some decisions, gear yourselves up. Feel free to stand up if you like. And here we go. Let's be Carmen. On that note, any questions?
Matt, could you share the resources that you prepare for your singers before they walk into your rehearsal room?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's very much like Kathy. It's a similar panel of things. So they get a full rehearsal schedule. I give them usually a translation, well, definitely a translation, probably some kind of IPA or transliteration or pronunciation guide to the piece. And all of their divisi and all the crazy markings that we need to do. But the big one is the translation and the pronunciation, because that can be very cumbersome. Again, especially in a French opera, it's really messy. Castel is the guy who's famous for doing these for sort of all the operas up to like 1900 or so.
And recordings, do you give them specific recording guides or not?
I go back and forth on this. Sometimes I give recordings, but I'm cautious about it because I don't want them to mimic the recording sound. I want them to do the thing that I want it to sound like. So only if I can find a recording that I'm happy with 80% of.
Any other questions for Matt?
I'll ask one. Okay, so I love opera. I see a lot of opera, and it always amazes me when usually the prima donna is laying on the floor flat and she can sing that way. And I want to know, what techniques do you need to do that?
That's a good question. Just unbelievable amounts of practice, and that's the vocal technique side of just like studying the instrument and developing that I mean, it's technique. I can't give you unfortunately, I can't give like a one sentence answer, much as I wish I could. It'd be really rich if I could do that. It's mostly about physical structure, I think, and not letting things collapse. Yeah, not many sopranos will do that. A handful will, but not many are willing to put themselves out there quite like that, because it's really hard, because it uses gravity against its goal.
Right.
Thank you. Not a brilliant answer. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
some ways it's easier to sing while being in awkward positions. Yeah, sometimes moving around actually makes you sing better. I think that's the cool thing about operas. I've learned a lot about my voice doing some opera chorus stuff just because you're so much more physically active that it sort of gets rid of some of the tension stuff we fret about when we're in voice lessons or in choir, but you're moving around and it somewhat goes away. So it can be very freeing, actually.
Well, I want to thank Matt for this wonderful presentation. It's great to be able to sing a little Carmen on this Thursday evening with you, and also to Vinay for his wonderful introductory session on musicking. Both of these, I think, have been enriching, and I've certainly enjoyed seeing these presentations for a second time. Alyssa and I have to go to a rehearsal with the chorale, which begins in 2 minutes. So I want you to unmute and thank Matt for his wonderful presentation, and a second thank you.
Very funny. Steve Chorale.
We hope to see you next Thursday for our second musicking sessions with our emerging conductors. Have a great evening. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Vinay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.